News just today show that North Korea has begun the process of dismantling a key missile site, and we appreciate that. We had a fantastic meeting with Chairman Kim, and it seems to be going very well.
Some encouraging news from North Korea today, as new satellite images reportedly show some of its missile launch sites are being dismantled as part of the president's deal to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. So if this is true, this represents a glimmer of hope for the White House amidst some rocky negotiations that began in secret during the early days of the 2016 election. And tonight, we are getting a closer look at one part of how the Trump-Kim negotiations found their beginnings in an American tragedy that is detailed in a deeply researched new story in GQ magazine. It is called The Untold Story of Otto Warmbier. It digs into the secret talks that took place to bring the American college student home, describing what happened to Otto as, quote, even more shocking than anyone knew. Trace Gallagher is live in our West Coast newsroom tonight with the story. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Martha. GQ is reporting that in June of last year, President Trump signed off on a secret mission to send a plane load of diplomats and doctors into North Korea to bring Otto Warmbier home. The article says Mr. Trump told then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to, quote, take care of Otto. But at the time, it was also known that Warmbier, who'd been held for 15 months, was unconscious. His parents were told by their home state of Ohio Senator Rob Portman that their son had brain damage, yet they held out hope that he was in a medically induced coma. That hope faded when the plane carrying their son arrived back in Cincinnati, and they saw him strapped to a stretcher, jerking violently and howling. Doctors still don't know what caused the injuries, but there was talk of torture and coercion, as evidenced by Warmbier's confession statement in February 2016. Watch.
I have been very impressed by the Korean government's humanitarian treatment of severe criminals like myself.
Later, the New York Times cited anonymous sources claiming U.S. intelligence reports indicate Warmbier was repeatedly beaten by North Korea. The torture theory was then embraced by President Trump and Otto Warmbier's parents.
He was blind. He was deaf. As we looked at him and tried to comfort him, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth.
But a day later, the Hamilton County, Ohio coroner contradicted the Warmbier statement, saying she found no signs of trauma to the teeth and no obvious sign of torture. But she also confirmed there was brain damage. Here she is.
There's a couple of ways that you can get that. So you either have to discontinue blood flow to the brain or stop breathing. And what caused either one of those possible events, we wouldn't know. I mean, could that have been torture at the time? We don't know.
The writer of the GQ piece says he spoke to a dozen experts and only one thought there was any remote possibility that Warmbier was tortured. And today, when Fox News asked the State Department if Warmbier was in fact tortured, we were told only that the administration holds North Korea accountable for Otto Warmbier's unjust imprisonment. Warmbier's parents have not yet commented on the GQ article. Martha.
Well, there's no doubt about it that they are accountable for what happened to him when he was in their custody. That's to be sure. Trace, thank you very much. So here now, a man who is mentioned quite a bit in this story. He was a crucial part of the secret negotiations with North Korea. Mickey Bergman, executive director of the Richardson Center for Global Engagement, has worked on these kinds of cases for years, bringing back hostages. Mickey, thank you very much for being here. First of all, your reaction to the suggestions in this story.
Well, I think the story is thorough, it's deep, it takes into account a lot of different interviews. Governor Richardson and myself were interviewed by the reporter several times, and I think the reporter did a good job. There's parts of all of this that none of us know, and I think you just touched on it in your coverage. There's no doubt, and I got a chance to see Otto when he came back to Ohio. Of the damage that he had, but as we heard, we don't know exactly what caused it, and I think Fred and Cindy, his parents, know everything that they need to know. The North Koreans killed their son, and they're looking for accountability, and there should be accountability. and it's a tragedy. And at the same time, I also want to remind you that what happened to Odo is the exception to other cases that we've seen in North Korea. I was on your show a few months ago when we welcomed back 3 other Americans coming back, and they were healthy. There's a lot of mystery around what happened over there.
You know, it's very clear that he was under mental duress, and how could he not be? He's a young man with his whole future ahead of him, who, according to them, you know, took some piece of propaganda to bring home as a souvenir and then saw his entire life end. He was going to be there for the foreseeable future, 15 years, and there's a suggestion in here that that may have led possibly to something that led to, you know, oxygen being cut off to his brain, and even the suggestion that he may have tried to take his own life. His parents have not responded to this story. They do not believe that that is the case in any way. But even if that were the story, what is still clear is that doing this kind, and you say that what they routinely do is put them in a room, question them for sometimes 15 hours on end, and mental torture is absolutely part of the equation in all these cases.
Correct. And especially when you think about Odo being there, we know what was happening here. We know that there was a movement, that there was an attempt to get him. We don't know that he knew any of it. It is possible for somebody in isolation like that to be told many things that can be really devastating. Anywhere from, I know it might sound not so serious, but for somebody saying, hey, your parents don't care about you. Your parents admitted your fault. Your government is shying away from you. All those things, when they're repeated at you and you have no outlet, can get to you. So there's, again, what the exact cause of his condition, I think we are not going to find out, but the overall responsibility and accountability for his health, no matter how it took place, was the North Korean government. And I think that's the important thing for Fred and Cindy.
I mean, it's hard to imagine something that would be more torturing to a child than to hear that your parents don't care about you. I mean, that is that would be absolutely devastating to this young man or to anyone else. In terms of what we're seeing now, the dismantling of this facility and their nuclear operations, how optimistic are you that they want to move forward with this dismantling? What do you think's going on?
I think what we saw today, the images, is a very good sign. It means that Secretary Pompeo managed to get back on track after a bumpy visit he had. And I think what's important for us to understand that we're looking at the timing of position, at the period of positioning by both sides. The summit last month was very good. It allowed the 2 leaders to meet, but it did not produce a workable framework, which was the task of Secretary Pompeo since. And so when Secretary Pompeo meets harsh language when he visits North Korea, that's the North Koreans' positioning. When Secretary Pompeo goes to the UN, as he did last week, to reinstate maximum pressure, that's the US positioning. So we're going to see this. It's going to be bumpy, and we need to remember not to cry all is lost every time there is a setback, and not to celebrate mission accomplished every time we have a step forward. This is going to be a long and bumpy road ahead.
As you've said often, when the North Koreans say no, they mean not yet. And you found that in your negotiations over the years and working with them closely in something called the New York Channel here in New York, which I thought was fascinating as part of the story. Mickey, thank you very much. Great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So still to come this evening, wow. From America's dad to America's newest sex offender. He is being categorized that way by the state of Pennsylvania. His people are fighting back. The shocking news story about Bill Cosby. And Republicans slammed the president for extending a lifeline to farmers who are hard hit by his tariffs. The Secretary of Agriculture joins us here to respond to that criticism coming up in a moment. And one of the real-life farmers on wage war with China. $12 billion in aid will go to farmers whose harvests have been hurt by the tariffs. Kendall Culp is the Indiana farmer, has been for 40 years, and raises soybeans, corn, wheat, beef, cattle, and hogs. He's also vice president of Indiana Farm Bureau and on the board of directors for the American Soybean Association, so he knows whereof he speaks. Kendall, good to see you tonight. Thank you very much for being here. The $12 billion, how does that go over with you?
Well, obviously, we appreciate the president having our backs as farmers, and he said that he would do that as this trade issue has continued on. He said he would be supporting of us, and well, we appreciate that. Obviously, we would just like to have a deal done. Would be what we would really like to see done in the long run.
What kind of deal? You want to see NAFTA? You want to see TPP put back on the table?
Well, obviously, NAFTA is what needs to happen first. NAFTA is really very important to the agriculture economy, not only to Indiana, but all farmers in the United States. You know, there are both of those are top 5 trading partners for the United States. A lot of corn, a lot of soybeans, a lot of meat products are exported to both of those countries. And I think what we're being told is that would be the model. And so we would like to see NAFTA done so we can continue to see trade agreements with other countries. That's what the administration said they preferred. Instead of larger multilateral trade agreements, they would rather see unilateral or bilateral trade agreements. And so we're anxious to see those take place so our commodities continue to flow to these other countries.
I mean, obviously, the president's very concerned about people in your situation and generally part of his base. And he does not want to lose your support. And here's one of the tweets that he put out today. Tariffs are the greatest. Either a country which has treated the United States unfairly on trade negotiations negotiates a fair deal, or it gets hit with tariffs. It's as simple as that. And everybody's talking. Remember, we are the piggy bank that is being robbed. All will be great. And earlier today, he said, you got to stick it out. You got to fight. Nobody else fought it. So he's essentially asking for your patience and saying that in the end, it will pay off for you. Do you believe that?
Well, I think farmers all along have been very supportive of the administration. Secretary Perdue has said multiple times, as farmers, if we raise the commodities and the crops, that the government will find a home for those and will sell those for us. And so we believe that. We want to actually, we want to see that take place and happen. So, farmers are free trade people. We want free trade. We want fair trade. We want open markets. We're overproducers in this country. The U.S. farmers are. And so we produce way more than what the American citizens can consume. So we have to have a market and export those for our market around the world. 95% of the population lives outside of the United States. Right. And so it's important that our goods get to those people.
I got to go. But before I let you go, do you think it will change anyone's vote or support in your group for the president? Is that in danger?
They're still patient right now. We're a ways here in the Midwest. We're a little ways from harvest. We're a couple months away yet. If this drags on and we get past harvest and our bins are full and we have a good crop and we have poor market prices, then I think you're going to see more farmers saying that we need to have this deal done quickly. Yeah. All right,
Kendall. Thank you very much, Kendall Culp. Good to speak with you tonight, sir. Here now for a story exclusive to answer to those questions, Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue. Sir, welcome. Very good to have you with us tonight. Well, what's your response to Mr. Culp?
Well, I think, again, he's a farmer, and our farmers are real patriots. There's not a farmer in this country that'd not rather have a good crop at a fair price than a government check. But when we have trade disruptions that we have now, we believe illegal retaliatory tariffs against our farmers, then they need some help. And that's exactly what the president has promised, and that's what he's delivered. Our farmers, if there were open trade around the world, they would benefit greatly. And that's what we would like to see. There have been non-tariff barriers for years, and China has cheated ever since she got in the WTO. So this is what the president is, the first one to call them on it. And that's what we need, is someone to play fair.
So, I mean, in terms of China and many other countries, they have the ability to manipulate their currency. They can manipulate their markets to a great extent. They can offset some of these tariffs. Is this, sort of the administration's way of trying to offset while obviously keeping within the rules that we have as a country?
It is. It's a temporary measure until we can get these trade disruptions resolved. The president wants trade more than anyone to be. He wants free and fair trade. Even our allies at the EU have non-tariff barriers that are damaging to our farmers. Our farmers are the most competitive in the world. If you turn them loose with reciprocal trades, they can outcompete anyone in the world, and that's why we face these unfair trade practices from around the world.
But let me ask you something, because there's a lot of effort and a lot of discussion today about carve-outs, about exceptions for certain and industries. And that's a dangerous road to go down, because next thing you know, you're carving out everybody who is, lobbying and pushing hard to be the one who gets that exception.
Our farmers provide national food security, which is actually national security, just like our defense. If we don't have enough to eat, this country is in an amazing situation that's not very helpful. And that's why the president understands how important the farmers are to the economy, and the farmers are important to our national security.
All right, so I'm hearing you're going to protect them, and we will see how it all works out. Agriculture Secretary Senator Perdue. Thank you, sir. Good to have you on the show tonight. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Knight.
You bet. So coming up next, John Stossel is standing by with a paper straw, and it's just a disaster. Will any of them live up to plastic? We're going to test it out, because you know this problem at home. I know you have witnessed this, and John's going to explain it to us. But first, he was once one of America's most beloved figures. Comedian Bill Cosby is now one step away from being labeled a sex offender for life in the state of Pennsylvania, and that might be the least of what he has coming to him ultimately. Governor Mike Huckabee with a big picture look at all of this. Role models, celebrity, expectations that we have for these people, all of that.